Good afternoon, everyone, or potentially good morning and good late evening. We've got a good group on the call today as we prepare for our arrival into Buenos Aires. For some of you, that's 25 more sleeps away. For the rest of you, it's 35. And when we do come together on Voyage 1, we'll have 17 different countries represented. On Voyage 2, we will have 20 different countries represented. As a result, this is a bit of a global update call. My name is Jeff Adams. I'm the president of Marathon Tours, if I've not had the pleasure of meeting you previously. And for this particular trip, I'm also your race director. So what we have found in prior years is having a webinar like this to help reinforce some of the key information will accomplish a number of different things for us. So the goals for this call, first of all, are to help you fine-tune your preparations. In doing that, goal number 2 is to help you increase your confidence that you are ready for the trip, you're ready for the race, and by increasing your confidence, hopefully that reduces a little bit of your stress, and that takes us to goal number 3, which is to begin the journey of turning all of you into ambassadors of Antarctica. So I'll be sharing quite a bit of information with you on this call. It will be recorded if you are listening to this via recording, not live, or you have to bounce off midway during the call. No worries. We'll be sending out a link so that you can listen to this as many times as you want or revisit certain pieces. We'll go in order of race first for both the runners and for the supporters. Each of you have very important roles in this event. We'll go there first, and then we'll come back and do a bit of a beginning to end Buenos Aires, Ushuaia, ship, Ushuaia update. So with that, Mary Kate, let's get into the information that you have put together for us. Before we get into the specifics of the race, I do want to take one more opportunity to promote the good work we do with Oceanides. Oceanides is also celebrating its 30th year, just as the Antarctica Marathon is this year. For those of you in Voyage 1, by the way, you'll be running the 27th running, and for those of you in Voyage 2, the 28th running. One of the things that's been important in each of the events is the mileage markers that we donate and you sponsor to provide support and funding for Oceanides. I happen to be on the board of Oceanides, and I'm proud to say this is the only publicly supported Antarctica research program, as I mentioned, celebrating its 30th year, and Marathon Tours and each of us collectively are their biggest donor each year. So these mileage markers that you can have personalized, see them on the course, get those photo ops, and then keep them as a keepsake after the event is over, have always been very popular. We do retain a few numbers in reserve, 13, 26, 31 for the Ultra. And we'll auction those off on the ship. Other things that we'll auction off on the ship will include the start-finish banners, other signage, penguin crossings, for example, different mementos from our journey together to Antarctica and back, as well as hopefully a one-of-a-kind ship's map. So Captain typically is very accommodating and provides that for us. Put all that together and we'll typically raise between the two voyages $40,000 to $50,000. But it all starts with these mileage markers. So last call on the mileage markers. We need to get to the printer and be able to bring those with us. So with that reminder, let's jump into where we're going and what that looks like in terms of race day. So we're all flying into Buenos Aires. Big reason we do that is not only is it a great cultural experience, but because we do have so many different countries represented from around the globe annually on this trip, we want to build in a little bit of a cushion and not leave anybody behind. I'd hate to think that we were on the wait list for 1, 2, 3 years, and then because of a boggled flight, one of us were to miss it. So 3 nights in Buenos Aires to begin our journey together. And then on that 4th day, we will via charter head to Ushuaia. Ushuaia is the southernmost city in the world, and that's where we'll embark on our 10-night journey on Ocean Albatross, one of the newer of the two ships that we use with our partners, Albatross Expeditions. Many of you know Albatross from the adventure marathons that we also support, such as the Great Wall, Big Five. This is their expedition division, and these two ships were delivered 2 years ago and 3 years ago, respectively. So we've got the newer ship for this year, and I think you're going to be very happy with that. That ship is a faster ship than what we had previously, and also a more stable ship with stabilizers they're able to deploy. So as we leave Ushuaia and work our way down the Beagle Channel, we eventually have to jump out into the Drake Passage. This is where the Pacific, Atlantic, and Southern Oceans all converge. So I guess the best way to describe that is visualize yourself as tennis shoes in a washing machine, potentially getting tossed around. We'll either have the Drake Shake with the weather kicking up, or we'll have the Drake Lake with a pretty clear, easy sailing. I'll tell you, one of the benefits of these new ships is they are faster than what we had before. So with the prior ships, we really didn't have the luxury of holding back in the Beagle Channel if there was weather blowing through on the Drake. These ships, we can hang back a half a day, a few hours, whatever is needed for the storm to pass, and then duck in behind the storm. So in our experience in the last 3 years, we've had more Drake Lakes than Drake Shakes. But that's going to take us to King George Island. So let's jump to a little closer view there. And the King George Island, part of the Antarctic Peninsula, and specifically we're going to go to King George Island, where we have 4 research bases that we will be interacting with on race day. So let's jump to the next slide. As we do get down into this region and on race day, let me just pause and let you know weather-wise, on average, you'll see all 4 seasons during the course of your run. You might have on the bottom portion of the course, center bottom of this visual, by the Great Wall Station, a little more exposed. We might see a little snow coming in sideways off the water. And then we get up above by the Frey base, which is a Chilean base. You might be unzipping because you're protected from the wind and the sun's out. So I'll get to clothing and how to dress and manage that part of the process here in a minute. But this is where we will come ashore for the race. The ship you can see positioned offshore, directly out from where the Russian base, Bellinghausen, and Frey, which is the Chilean base, share a common border. We expect, based on the update that we had yesterday with one of our team members that works actually on the Frey base, he's in charge of all the logistics for the airfield there. We were updated that all 4 bases are excited that we are going to be there. Typically, we'll have some runners from each of the bases. And as it stands right now, logistics in terms of any movement on the bases is going to be minimal on our 2 race days. What that means to you is we will have both sides of our preferred course available to us. So as we come ashore by the red dot there, that's a landing area just on the inside of the Russian base, and that will be our start finish. We will have, for the half marathoners, the expectation right now is a loop where you will go down to the south, to the bottom of the map, to the Great Wall Station. That's about 2.2 miles out. You'll come back. You'll then go by the start finish, head out to the Uruguayan base, Artigas, up to the upper right, come back to the start finish, and then go to China and back one more time. So 1.5 loops for the half marathoners. Marathoners will be 3 full loops. We will take you out to the Uruguayan side first, back to the start finish, down to the Great Wall, back to the start finish. That'll be 1 loop, and we'll do that 3 times based on our current plan. On voyage 1, we also have a number of you running the ultra. You'll follow the same course and be part of the same wave as the marathoners, which means you'll come through the start finish on that third lap and extend your run by another 4 kilometers before turning around and finishing your 50-kilometer race. Weather conditions, as I mentioned, all 4 seasons. Temperatures typically around 25 to 30 Fahrenheit, so 0 to a couple degrees below 0 Celsius. And the whole key to this race is how we layer and prepare for the course. So let's get on to the next one. The course, I was commenting on the pre-call, this is a little deceptive. This is coming up out of the Russian base on the way to the Uruguayan base, just at the foot of a hill that's been cropped out of it. It's one of the bigger hills on the Uruguayan side. So what you're going to see is good variety of terrain. These areas were all created by tidal glaciers retreating millions of years ago. So you have everything from running along the spit down by the Chinese base to some pretty significant climbs on both sides. You know, the graph that you see at the bottom is a little misleading. Just set your expectations that you've got a big hill on the Chinese side and you've got a couple of big rolls and hill climbs on the Uruguayan side. In total, for the half marathoners, over 700 feet of elevation gain, and for the marathoners, over 1,400 feet of elevation gain. The issue is going to be if we have slippery conditions for one of 2 reasons. Either it's been above average in the warmth and we're getting above average runoff from the glaciers above, then we're going to be slipping and dealing with more muddy conditions, which we had in wave 1 last year, or like this picture, we will have had some freezing precip, and as we run on, you know, those paths that can get packed and a little icy. So the terrain varies. There's going to be some areas where you're going to be more comfortable walking and then regaining your pace, you know, once you hit the flats like you're looking at in this picture. But this is a hilly course. So any final training that you're looking to fine tune, I would say go find some big hills and just work the hills a little bit. So mentally you're ready for what you're likely to see here. You're going to prefer the Chinese side a little more than the Uruguayan side, just because of the footing in a couple of areas. The Uruguayan side typically is a little muddier, again, because of runoff of some glaciers just up above us. So we'll be prepared for whatever the weather deals with us, and we'll talk about that in just a second when we get into clothing and recommended gear. Let's shift gears and talk about course time limits. For the ultra on voyage 1, that's an 8-hour cutoff. For the marathon on both voyages, 6.5 hours, and we would like to see you coming through at least by 3 hours and 10 minutes, the halfway point. I'll come back to that in just a minute. And for the half marathoners, it's a 4.5 hour cutoff. We do have the ability for you anytime up until race day to change distances. So if you've got a nagging injury that's just not fully healed and you originally thought you were going to be running the marathon or training just didn't happen, life got in the way, you can make those changes up to race day and still be eligible for awards and recognition. You can also make that decision on race day if you are running the marathon or the ultra for that matter, and it's just not your day. Again, maybe it's an injury issue. As long as you let me know and the team know before you cross the halfway mark for your respective race, we can opt down to that half marathon level and have that be an official finish. If weather conditions allow, big if, and I can look you in the eye and see that you're feeling good, you're running within your abilities, and we can go a little longer, that will be a game time decision. So we'll communicate that to you. We'll be talking to you as you come through that start finish time. start-finish gate, and just keep everybody abreast of what is in the forecast, what's happening, and making sure that each of you are running safely within your own abilities. So if we do have the ability to extend, our goal is to help every one of you not only get to the start line, but also get to the finish line. We will have what is referred to as an FNT, or a finish with no time, designation by your name. So that will qualify you as having completed the race for the medal and recognition, for credit towards your 7 Continents Club goal of running a race on all 7 continents. Just would not be eligible for the award in that situation either. So the awards would be the overall winners as well as the age group champions. So we'll spend more time talking about this when we're together in Buenos Aires at the mandatory briefing before we fly down to Ushuaia together. And this is one of those areas where I would encourage you to really spend some time, make sure you understand, listen to this a few times, and then if you still have a question, reach out to us so that we can make sure you clearly understand what your options are. This is more important for a few of you that are dealing with injuries, most likely than the masses. But I want to make sure everybody's very comfortable with what your options are so you can make the choice that's best for you. Let's jump to the waves, which I talked about briefly. In Antarctica, so not only with our landing in King George Island, but all of our following landings as we are enjoying exploring this pristine wilderness, there is a very important Antarctica Treaty requirement that no more than 100 people go ashore at a particular landing place at the same time. So our way to adhere to that policy, with over 135 to 140 runners on each ship, is to have 2 waves. So the current plan is for wave 1 to go off first, with the marathoners and the 50K participants on voyage 1, marathoners on voyage 2 solely. Once those runners have ran and completed the first half, so they've gone to Uruguay for that group and come back through, then we'll be in a position with those folks dispersed up to 2.5 miles away, 2.2 miles away, we'll be able to bring the second wave in and start that race. And so that'll be the half marathoners. So there will be a staggered start. This will get the runners dispersed over a 4.4 mile area, which is well within the requirements of the Antarctic Treaty, and with various paces. Obviously, we'll have runners finishing and going back to the ship, which further alleviates any concern around that requirement. This approach also allows us to maximize the experience for the supporters as well. So that's the method behind the madness. It's worked very, very well over the last 3 years. Once we implemented this approach, it also reduces the risk on our staff, the expedition team staff, in that we're not out there from 7 in the morning till 6 at night. We can get the race accomplished in a more compressed time. Start time will be determined by the weather. There are some requirements in terms of wind and our ability to put zodiacs in the water. And so that will be something that we'll be updating the night before at the briefing after we set up the course. And it could be adjusted before you wake up the next morning. So flexibility is going to be very important throughout this, throughout this experience together. Once completed, and this is the opposite of optional, once you've completed, we'll take a quick picture. But other than that, we're going to get you back on the ship as quick as possible. So we're going to get your outerwear on, get your boots on, get you on a Zodiac, get back to ship. If you've got friends that you want to come back on shore and support and cheer on, love to have you back. We'll have the Zodiacs running back and forth nonstop. But we know from experience that the greatest risk all of you have on race day is those 10 to 15 minutes once you cross the finish line and before we hopefully have you back on ship. We just don't want anybody going hypothermic after exerting all that energy, perspiring, and then you stop running and it hits you quick before you even know what's going on. So limited social media opportunities once you cross the finish line. And I'll come back to that in a minute in terms of some other things we'll do to support those goals around photographs, et cetera. So Mary Kate, let's go to the next one. When we come ashore, and this will start a day or two before on ship, we're going to have a series of tarps, and those tarps, if we do our job right, we'll have a corresponding race numbers. So when you come ashore, if you're in the 1 to 30 marathon group, for example, number 1 to 30, we'll have a tarp for you. As you come ashore, you're going to be wearing the boots that we all get to borrow while we're on the ship, so you don't need to pack boots. You'll wear those for all of your landings. You'll have your outerwear, which would be windproof, waterproof outer pants, and then you'll have the parka that will be provided to all of you, and that is yours to keep at the end of the trip. So that's your outerwear. So we're going to peel off the boots and put those down on the tarp first, pants second, jacket third, as we get down to our running clothes, and then we're going to put our dry bag on top of our stack so we can easily find that as the race unfolds. As I mentioned, you're going to be coming back to the start finish a number of times based on which distance you're running. So having that gear bag accessible to you for additional fuel, additional layers, removing a few layers as you warm up, that's a big part of your support. Within those bags as you arrive, we're going to recommend, if you're not wearing a camelback or water belt of some kind, hydration system that you take with you, we're going to encourage everybody to have 3 bottles at least. We'll mark those on the ship so you can clearly find your bottle quickly out on the course. And we're going to coach each of you to drop one of those bottles at the start finish, so you always have a water there. And on your first loop out to Uruguay, we'll encourage you to take a bottle with you. Halfway out, we'll have volunteer and tarp in a protected area for you to drop that bottle. And that's going to give you a bottle about 1.5 miles out, 1.5 miles coming back. You can pick up that same bottle to hydrate. And then as you come back through the start finish for your first pass through, we'll grab that 3rd bottle and take it out to the Chinese side of the course and drop it much like we just did on the Uruguayan side. So again, there will be a tarp, there will be a volunteer there that'll coach you on where to drop the bottle, and that way you'll have 3 bottles out on the course, approximately 1.5 miles apart for each bottle. The goos and other things I'll get to in just a minute. Also at the start finish, in addition to the tarp, is going to be a couple of portable honey pots, they call them, portable potties. Key on this one is hydrate in a way where you can vacate before you leave the ship. If you do the math, from the start finish, we go out 2.2 and we come back 2.2. That's 4 miles between bathroom stops once we're on the course. So I really encourage you to hydrate in a way that you have vacated before you leave the next morning on the ship on the Zodiac for the race. Not a lot of opportunities, and because of the requirements in terms of no wrappers, nothing left behind, using nature when needed out on the course is not an option. So we need to make sure everybody adheres to that. Nutrition, as we've said in some of the earlier briefings, we have a 0 footprint policy, and the most important thing is no wrappers. So if you think about the gel, you'll want to have a gel flask to squeeze that into ahead of time. Chews, gummies, energy bars, all that I'm going to encourage you to take out of its wrapper, break it into bite-sized pieces, and have it in your front pocket. Ziplocs, much like wrappers, don't work as your fingers get colder and the wind gets whipping. That can be in some endangered Antarctic moss within a second, and we can't go in there to get that out. And if that's something that's discovered by a scientist, then our privilege of being able to run a race on that continent could end that day. So everybody needs to do their job on this one. Here again, we've got the dry bags at the start finish. So Tupperware or in your pocket is a way to go. We'll also talk on the ship, but it's worth noting right now so that you don't go buy something at your local health food store. No raw seeds. So no energy bars with raw seeds that could germinate and introduce something to this area that shouldn't be there. Water bottles, obviously for some of you, it's going to be water, it's going to be Gatorade, it's going to be other nutrition drinks. And for those of you wearing Camelbacks, the question always comes up, do I have to worry about it freezing? And the answer is no. Between you agitating it while running, the temperatures, and especially if you're putting any kind of powder in, like a Gatorade powder, you're raising the freezing point. Not an issue. So just don't worry about that one at all. All right, let's shift gears for 1 second. Let's talk about the spectators. Spectators will have a briefing on the ship, much like we will for the runners. And we'll have signups so that you can make sure you're going ashore when your loved one is running the race. And the activities that we're going to be looking for assistance on is anything from being out on the course. So those of you that want to go explore the course and help out at a water drop or at the turnaround, love to have you out there. Those of you that want to be more in the start finish area, handing out the medals as the runners cross the finish line, that's always a very popular option for the spectators. And then especially later in the day as runners are finishing, being over on the tarps and helping them quickly get dressed and down to the Zodiac is also greatly appreciated. So volunteers, you might have the best job for the day and one of the most satisfactory jobs for the day out there as well. So we'll get into much more detail on that on the ship with the signups to accommodate your preferred times. Our biggest challenge is once we have spectators go out, they just want to stay all day. And I don't mind that one bit. It's really one of the special parts about this race. In terms of photographic memorabilia, we've got fantastic photographer, Kevin McGarry, Scotsman, will be out there all day. He is one of the best in the industry. And I say that not only because we cross paths in Berlin and he's got all the finish line credentials, but I also see the pictures of where some of the top athletes have invited him to be their wedding photographer. So we'll have that. Those will all be complimentary. All of our staff will be busy trying to capture images. And so we'll have a number of Google shared albums of race day, ship life, excursions, Buenos Aires, and then we're going to ask all of you to do the same and upload some of your favorite photos that you capture onto albums that are available for all of the participants to share in. So we'll have, on average, tens of thousands of pictures in 6 different albums. Half of which are from staff and our professional photographer, and half of which are from you all. So there will be no shortage of things to do when you return home in terms of photographs and posting on social media. Let's go to race gear. So let's go head to toe, starting with the feet. Because of the terrain, these are the roads, and they're not paved roads. They're frozen or they're a little muddied up and then perhaps frozen, perhaps mushy on race day. But this is what connects the bases and connects it to the airfield on the Chilean base. So you want to have stability. And so I definitely recommend off-road or trail running shoes. If you have water resistant or waterproof shoes, I prefer those. I don't know that I'd go out and buy a brand new pair because they are going to get mucked up. But definitely trail shoes. Waterproof, great. Water resistant, good. But trail shoes needs to be priority one. I'm going to jump down 2 or 3 bullet points real quick. In terms of socks, my recommendation is to wear a thin liner sock, one that's going to hopefully be up over the calf, maybe one that you would use in a normal trekking boot. The reason for that is I don't want it bunching down around my heel, but I do want that extra layer of insulation as my feet potentially get a little moist. And also I want to have that protection against friction of any grit that gets into my shoe. So I'm a big fan of a thin silk or other wicking liner sock, and then your running sock can go on over that. I'm also a big fan of running gaiters. These are different than the gaiters I'll wear if I'm ice climbing. They're going to be a much shorter profile, but that's another level of protection for you to keep grit out of your shoes. I do not recommend, and hopefully will not see anybody stopping to try and change shoes midway through. That creates more problems than it helps. You're not going to get the grit out. You're going to potentially go hypothermic by stopping. So be prepared to wear the same shoes, but take the steps necessary to minimize the moisture and grit that's going to get in there. And if it does, have that liner in there to give you that protection. Micro spikes. Last year, it was a little warm on voyage 1. And as I said earlier, it was a little muddy. That led to a little bit of slipperiness. And then on voyage 2, it snowed overnight and we had good snow cover all day that started getting a little packed. If you have micro spikes, pack them, because we don't know what the weather is going to be like today in 25 days. So pack them. If you want to buy them, just to have a little more peace of mind, they're available at REI, online with Amazon. Just look at micro spikes. I do not recommend the yak tracks because of the mud and some of the rocks and other things. Those are going to get gummed up. The micro spikes will give you a little traction if it's icy. And if we really have conditions that concern me, we will bring ashore trekking poles. So if we've got a steep incline or decline and it's gotten too slippery because of ice or mud, we'll make sure we're working with the expedition team to have a bucket of poles out there that you can use to get to the top of the hill, and then next person that's coming the other way will use it to get down the hill. And that's another source of safety. The hydration vest I talked about, the dry bag I talked about. So let's get into the layers. First layer I would be looking at on my legs. If you're a slower runner, you're more prone to feeling a chill. I would wear some type of compression or thermal leggings. And then I would wear a ski pant or something of that nature over that gives you a little wind and water protection. For everybody, I would recommend that you have rain shell pants and jacket in your dry bag. But starting out and hopefully through most, if not all, the race, that would be sufficient. Those of you that are a little faster runners and less prone to getting chilled, I'd go with a medium weight compression running tights, and then just have the rain shell in your dry bag available if we start getting precip. On your core, much like I'm wearing today, I would just have a long sleeve wicking shirt or a running shirt underneath and a quarter zip available for you. So this is a Patagonia quarter zip. It just allows me to vent. So if I'm coming up out of the Chinese base into that area of the Chilean base where it tends to be more protected, then I would want to be able to vent a little bit. And then for a third layer, so base layer would be wicking or thermal on your core. Then something that gives you a little, at least quarter zip venting availability as a second layer. Third layer could be a running windbreaker that you have to something a little heavier. And then I would have a puffy to give me more insulation if it really chills off, as well as a rain shell in my dry bag. But the key here to this race is staying comfortable, but being able to ventilate in a way where you don't sweat too much. You know, that perspiration can come back to haunt you later in the race if you start to slow down and your base two layers are too wet. You're going to be a little more prone to, you know, hypothermia starting to impact you a little bit. In terms of head wear, obviously a buff, something that you can pull up or down, much like venting, you know, the jackets, a buff that you can pull up if you're going into the wind and getting a little more chill or snow, then you want to have that protection. And if you're not needing it, you can just obviously scrunch it down around your neck. Headwear, I would wear a knit ski cap or running cap. For those of you that like running caps with a brim, that's fine. It gives you another, you know, level of protection against the sun and any debris. But I would wear a knit cap over the crown, or I would use my buff to come up over the back of the hat to hold it in place. Because of the wind, just a traditional running cap without something to help hold it in place is very likely to get blown off. So as you look through some of the old pictures on social media, you might see somebody, myself included, wearing a brimmed hat, but then I have a stocking hat over, you know, over the crown just to keep it in place and provide a little more warmth. Eyewear is maybe the most important part of what I want to share on this slide. For those of you that have contacts, LASIK, a little more sensitive eyes, I recommend running goggles or ski goggles if you have them. And for those of you that's not an issue, definitely would recommend that you have sunglasses at the very least to provide you with some protection. And we do that. You're going to be able to layer up and layer down. We'll help you stay aware of the weather. We'll coach you as you're making your way around the course, especially later in the race if we think you need to be layering up. The key is having your bag. On non-race days, you'll be recycling all of this, with the exception of probably your running shoes. You'll be recycling all these clothes anyway. So let's make sure they go ashore with you in your gear bag that day. All right, let's jump to the start of the trip. Buenos Aires, as I mentioned, we're going to come into Buenos Aires together. It gives us a little bit of a cushion. It's a great cultural experience. We'll be staying in Puerto Madera, which is a very desirable area of Buenos Aires, at the Alvear Icon, which is a fantastic hotel. This gives us easy access to some of the best restaurants, the canal region, the old shipyards, which makes it easy for us to go out and do some shakeout runs. And we're approximately a half a mile away from a beautiful natural preserve that we'll also use, assuming the gates are open, for runs on some really wide, nice trails. It'll take us out along the delta, you know, as the ocean and the river coming through Buenos Aires meet. So some beautiful wildlife, but we'll have 2 or 3 different options for our afternoon shakeout runs. And then along the canals are some of the best restaurants in town as well. Very safe area. Like any other big city, you just have to be aware of your surroundings. We'll explore some of the major sites on tour day, and then you'll have a free day to go back and re-explore areas of interest, or perhaps take the high-speed ferry over to Uruguay, to Colonia for a day of exploring that area and then coming back. The current plan for the charter flight from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia is a favorable time. So I'm happy to say it's not a 1 o'clock in the morning wake up charter, but that can change. So we'll go into more detail once we're together in Buenos Aires. With the charter flight, as you can see on the slide, there are some very specific weight requirements in terms of carry-on and checked. Yes, we would like to have one nice outfit for our mandatory briefing in Buenos Aires, and also we can use that same outfit for the captain's dinner on the ship. But otherwise, we want to keep it fairly simple with our race gear and then some comfortable clothes to wear on the ship. The ship is usually fairly comfortable, and we're not putting on a fashion show or giving away awards for fashion on it. So comfort is the key on the ship, and that'll help us meet these baggage requirements. For those of you that are coming back to Buenos Aires and have booked an additional night at the Alvear Icon, one option for you is to check a bag there with some of the things that you brought. You maybe had a pre-trip elsewhere, or you have a post-trip scheduled once you come back. It's fine to leave a bag at the hotel and then reclaim it when we return 10 days later. So I'll remind you of that as well. But we really need to adhere to these policies. We had a situation a couple years ago on one of the charters where people doubled up, and as a result, some bags were left in Buenos Aires, and setting sail was delayed until the next morning when that flight finally brought the remaining bags. So don't be that person. On the carry-on bag, as always, with any of our trips, we recommend that you have any important medicines as well as race gear that you cannot replace easily in Buenos Aires or Ushuaia. So your international flight to Buenos Aires, the flight to Ushuaia, carry-on needs to have key components of what you're planning for race day, so that you're not caught short if something does happen to the bag and we are not able to retrieve it. Luckily, with a ship full of 145 runners, when we have had an issue, everybody's pitched in, and it has not been an issue. The one thing that's really tough is typically running shoes, though. So definitely have those on the check carry-on bag, if you would, please. International phone plans, obviously when we're on the ship, if we sign up for Wi-Fi or in the hotel, not an issue, but as we're out around in Buenos Aires and elsewhere, if you need to get a hold of us, we'd like you to be able to get a hold of us by WhatsApp or the numbers we provide in final docs, but it's going to require you have an international plan. So get with your carrier and see what your options are if you're not covered, or be prepared to download an eSIM card. Personally, I do both. I make sure I've got my international plan, and then I have an eSIM card because I don't want to miss your call if you're having an emergency. So that's a very important reminder. In terms of currency, pesos are the currency of choice. You're going to use that primarily for tipping and small items. Credit card is fine in most establishments in Buenos Aires and Ushuaia. And when we get on the ship as well, which I'll touch on that in ship life in more detail in just a second. And then obviously language Spanish. So if you don't use apps like Google Translate, I would suggest you download that on your phone as well. Nice thing about Google Translate, if I'm out in a restaurant and I'm looking at a menu, I can take a picture of it and it'll translate if I have the settings and have downloaded Spanish in this case ahead of time. So good flexibility with apps like Google Translate. You just need to download the app before you leave home. All right, let's run to ship life now. So ship life, time zone. This this first point on the slide, time zone on the ship is the same as when we're in Buenos Aires and in Ushuaia. The one exception is when we go ashore in King George Island for the race, we have 4 different bases, as I mentioned previously: the Chinese, the Chilean, the Russian, the Uruguayan base. They all have different time zones. Some of them are based on home, and some of them are based on things I haven't been able to figure out. It's always a challenge when we invite their runners to come out to figure out what time to tell them the race is starting, because it's different from base to base. And where you're going to see this is if you carry your phone on race day, you're going to see all of a sudden, your plan is switched over to Chinese telecom, and then you're on the Uruguayan plan when you're up in Uruguay. They do have star net and you will see that you have the ability to pick up phone signal or messages. Phone might start shaking a little bit because all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of texts on the Chilean Wi-Fi service. So the one time zone exception is when we're on King George. You might get a little confused. That's what's going on. Key thing with ship life, because many of you are on this ship to run a race, is going to be minimizing the effects of seasickness. I mentioned earlier, one of the benefits of the new ship is faster, which means we can be a little more selective when we jump out in the Drake, and also stabilizers that can be extended on days where we don't have ice in the area. So that will help, but I still recommend that all of you visit with your doctor and have a recommendation if you think you are at all susceptible to motion sickness. If you're not, you probably know it. If you're not sure, or you do know it, you need to get with your doctor. And the reason is it needs to be a recommendation or a prescription that works well with other medicines that you're perhaps taking. So we cannot make that call, nor should you expect to have an endless supply of medicine on the ship or with our doctor. They'll have some supplies, but it's not an endless. So we really recommend that the patch or other medicine is recommended by your doctor. I'm going to pause on this one for a minute and just kind of jump around. If you're at all concerned with having that medicine in you on race day, let's alleviate some of that concern right now. When we board the ship, we'll probably make an announcement. Either I'll have our doctor or the ship doctor make the announcement that it's now a good time to put on your patch, for example, so that the medicines can begin to get into your system before we clear the mouth of the Beagle Channel. We'll make a similar announcement once we're in the protection of the peninsula. Our goal, as I said earlier in the call, is for the afternoon of our second day at sea to be when we arrive in King George. That will allow our team to go ashore, meet with the bases, reconfirm their movement and logistics for the next day, set up the course, and then come back onto the ship to give you a briefing around dinner time. What we hope will happen is you all will have the opportunity to go on an excursion that afternoon while we're setting up the course and do, at the very least, a Zodiac cruise in the area. That's going to help alleviate some of the hangover from the seasickness medicine, and it's also going to help you get comfortable with your ability to get in and out of a Zodiac, and that's just one less thing you'll have to think about the next morning and afternoon. So if all things, back to the seasickness medicine, all things work the way they're intended to work, you'll patch up, get it in your system, minimize the impact, and then you'll be able to get it out of your system well in advance of going ashore to run the race. So ringing the bell loud on that one. Get with your doctors if you would, please. The excursions and other activities on the ship, typically we'll have breakfast together, and then we'll have an excursion. We went through the itinerary of landing choices on a call earlier today with our friends in Denmark. Some of our favorites are on the list this year, which is great. Typically we'll have breakfast, then we'll have an excursion, and some of you on that excursion might have the option to go kayaking based on weather conditions. Others might be Zodiacing for the first half, and the remainder maybe going ashore to hike up through Penguin Rookery or to the top of a mountain, to get a little exercise and nice view, whaling villages. All kinds of artifacts and experiences are built into the itinerary. So morning, we go out for an excursion. After that, we come back, warm up, have lunch, reposition while we're having lunch and resting up, and then we'll typically have another excursion in the afternoon, and then we'll repeat that over the next days. So goal 1, get down there on the second afternoon. Goal 2, be able to conduct the race as planned, and then goal 3 is maximize the excursions. If we need to delay departing King George because of weather and the inability to get the race in, we'll do that. So everything I've taken you through on this call, let's call this Plan A. Plan B might come into play. We had a situation 2 years ago, I think, where we got to Plan F, and I'm not sure what F stood for most people. I know what it stood for me. But we got the race in, we got the excursions in. We just weren't able to maximize the number of days that we would have liked to with the excursions. Finishing up on ship life, beverages of all type, food of all type, dietary needs. We always get very high marks with the staff on the ship in terms of food, beverage, so all available. If you do bring a bottle of wine onto the ship, there is a corkage fee if you're consuming that in public areas. If you're enjoying it in your cabin, there's no corkage fee, but what's available at the meals and in the bar after hours is more than adequate. Laundry service also available, and one of the prior updates link was provided to you that gave you a sense of that pricing. Wi-Fi also not inexpensive, but available. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, parkas will be provided to all of you. You keep those. That's a keepsake. The boots will be used and returned at the end of the ship. So don't take up precious packing space by packing boots. Keep it simple for what you're wearing on the ship. Currency, as mentioned, will be based in US dollars, but that will be done at the end of the trip. They'll issue you a card that you can use in the gift shop for beverages, and then you'll settle up at the end. Part of that settling up is a gratuity for the ship's crew. This will be the hotel staff and the restaurant staff. The one exception is the expedition team that is helping educate us, transport us, and keep us safe. That is a different group, and so that would be a cash only, and you can see our recommendation there. If it is $15 a day per person, so 150 is recommended, and I think you will all find that is a bargain. So let's finish up. We're on track for our 1 hour call, and this is our last slide. Next steps, if you haven't completed the participation declaration form, we need that. Flight information to Mary Kate and Ann needed as well. Race entry form, get that in. Again, we can change that up until race day and even on race day under certain conditions. Polar Challenge, those of you that did participate in the Arctic race in the end of August, 1st of September. That's another group that we'll be recognizing along with 7 Continents Club finishers. So raise your hand, self-identify if this is going to be your final continent to run a marathon on, or your final continent to run half marathons on, and now for Ship 1, also the ultra group. COVID booster, if you look at the headlines, the flu this year seems to be above average. COVID was an issue in the Arctic in September. If you've been on the wait list for 2 or 3 years and you're going to go to the trouble of traveling all the way to Buenos Aires and then Ushuaia and then through the Drake Passage to storm the beach on race morning like Navy commandos, probably makes sense to be a little safe here in the next few weeks before you leave. So I'd encourage you to get back in a little more of a bubble. If you are comfortable with the COVID boosters and haven't had one, I'd probably get one. I'd hate for somebody to get to Buenos Aires and then test positive, or get to Ushuaia and test positive, or worse yet, test positive on race morning and not be able to go shore and run. So just a cautionary recommendation on that one. PR, I've heard from a few of you, but I'm sure there's more of you that have interest in some press. Maybe it's through alumni magazines, local publications, through your employer. Maybe a large employer has a magazine. If you need any help with press opportunities, this being our 30th anniversary, Oceanides' 30th anniversary, lifetime accomplishment for each of you. We want to help you in any way possible. So providing some of the iconic photos, quotes, and other support we're ready to help you. Oliver on our team heads up marketing in Boston, and we will tap him in where needed based on your requests. I'm sure there's going to be some questions that we still didn't fully get to. And again, back to our goal, we want you to, start to relax, sleep well at night because you're not too anxious. Fine tune your planning. So make sure you send those questions into us. We'll get it back to you. A lot of the questions are going to be answered in the prior communication that went out, like the gear list that was sent out. So reread that information first, but feel free to reach out to Mary Kate, who is our trip designer for Voyage 1, or Anne, who is our trip designer for Voyage 2, and we'll get back to you. So I started with my goals for this call to help you fine-tune your planning, and 2, help you reduce a little of the stress and anxiety by understanding things a little bit better, help us celebrate our 30th anniversary. And I'm going to end with one more based on much of the information we just covered. As I alluded to earlier, the key to this working is all of us working together and all of us realizing we're going to be in one of the most remote places in the world. And that's going to require a lot of flexibility. That flexibility is going to be dictated by the weather and other conditions. So what I just covered with you is plan A. We might get to plan F, but we will get it done with everybody's help. So flexibility and that adventure spirit is really important. We do that right, we're going to accomplish our goals. We're going to come back as better global citizens and ambassadors of Antarctica, understanding the impacts of climate change at a much higher level. And we will have stories to tell. So thanks for hopping onto the call. I'm giving you back 3 minutes. So that doesn't always happen with me. Look forward to welcoming you in Buenos Aires. Me personally, I'll be with Group 1 in Buenos Aires, then down to Ushuaia and hosting the ship along with Kevin, our photographer, and Felipe, our friend and partner who is head of logistics on the Chilean base. And then we will not be back up in Ushuaia. We'll still be on the ship for Group 2, and we'll be welcoming you with our other host team. And then I'll see you when you arrive in Ushuaia, along with Kevin and Felipe will be waiting to welcome you on board and tell you how great Voyage 1 was so that we can get excited about Voyage 2. So with that, safe travels. See you all on the other end of the globe down in South America soon. Thanks.